Zaina Mahmood, who's here tonight, and also Richard Boyer, who's one of the senior lecturers and the law school's director of education. So Zaina's going to start us off. She's currently an LLM student in commercial law, and she also did her grad LLB here as well. So I'll leave it off to you, Zaina.
Perfect. Okay, so how many of you are in first year? Okay, second year? And then third years? Perfect, okay, so most of first and second years. Okay. Obviously I feel very unqualified to give this talk because who really is qualified to give a talk on how to study smart. But what I guess I'll do is let you guys know how I studied my grad LLB, which is a little different than the 3-year law program there is here, because my first year did count unlike your first year. So I had to really get into it right away. And my second year was weighted more heavily, so it was 2/3 weighted for my second year, same as how for third year here it's weighted more heavily than your second year. So I had to jump right into it, which was not fun, but I did have the experience of having done a degree before this. So I did a degree back home at the University of Western Ontario, where I did neuroscience, and then I came here, did a 2-year grad LLB, and now I'm doing my master's in commercial law, and I hope to do my PhD after this. So studying is something that I clearly like to do, so I'm hoping that helps with this talk. The first thing to really realize is the fact that no one studies the same. So I could sit here and tell you how I managed to get a first in some of my classes and walk you step by step what I did, but just because it worked for me doesn't mean it'll work for all of you. So what I learned quickly from law is it's nothing like what I had studied before. So all of the knowledge I got from science, all of the ways I had studied for my science exams and for my psychology, philosophy, everything else did not count at all anymore, because law is a very different creature when it comes to studying. So obviously, as you guys have seen, some of these textbooks are ridiculously enormous. You might have 2 textbooks for a class, and you have all the cases and you have all the articles, and it's a very daunting thing to look at the reading list. And depending on the classes that you're taking, and depending on the lecturers and professors who are teaching you, they might suggest a different way of approaching it. So I've got lecturers, and I have lecturers here, who would say to read the book, read the chapter in the book, then come to class, then read it after again. And that's what worked for me. I've had lecturers tell me, do not touch the textbook under any circumstances until we have finished the course, which is currently what I'm doing in one of my classes right now. So I have no idea every week going in blindly, and that's a little more daunting. When reading the textbook, especially when it's your first year, actually realistically all 3 years, you will have no idea what happens at the beginning, and it can be really terrifying because you feel like you should know this, especially when you're in second and third year. You feel like you should have an idea of what you're reading and how it ties in. But I think that the biggest thing is to realize that it all comes together at the end. So for second and third years, you guys will know this. First years, you will figure this out. Contract law makes no sense when you learn it chapter by chapter. You learn like offer, acceptance, consideration, intent to create legal relations, and they all seem so separate. And then you learn mistake and breach, and then at the end, you finally realize it all ties in together, and it's one of those things where it's not stepwise that you learn, everything comes in together. Realistically, the only class I think I've taken in the past 2 years where it's kind of been separate chunks, and even then not really, is land law, because you learn leases, then you learn easements, then you learn mortgages, and you kind of learn in that way. And registration, underlies all of that. So first thing is just don't freak out when you don't get how everything ties in, because it will come together at the end of the year. And you do have those 6 weeks of Easter holiday where you will be studying. Whether you take all 6 weeks like I did in my 2 years here, whether you take 3 weeks like some of my friends, it really doesn't matter. You will have people here every single day at the library sitting at LASIK with this massive bunch of textbooks, and their highlighters neatly organized, and they've got that Snapchat ready, and they're studying smart the entire time, and they're there from 7 a.m. all the way to 9 p.m., and realistically they've got nothing done. For some people that might work. For other people, they might not go to the library, they might just sit there for 3 hours a day and just solidly study. It really doesn't matter how long you're spending at the library. Don't compare yourself to anyone else. It really doesn't matter. For some classes, you might feel like you've spent an entire month studying. For others, it might just take 2 weeks and you get it. You just really have to play to your strengths. Like I know, for me, CNA was the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. Absolutely the hardest thing. Admin, not so much. It was the constitutional stuff. I just can't wrap my head around that. Contract, land, really easy. Really didn't take that much to do well in those classes for me. Same with EU. EU, I felt, was one of those classes where I got it even though I've been told it was like constitutional. It is not like constitutional. Very different. It's really great though, in the second term. It's one of those things where it doesn't really matter. Some of my friends did really well in constitutional, completely bombed contract, and spent the same amount of time studying as I did. It's just really important to remind yourself that you cannot compare your study amount, your study skills to someone beside you. Because, let's face it, we're all law students, we're all competitive. Everyone wants to say, oh my god, it was so hard, I barely did any of the reading. Secretly, you've done all of the readings, but you just don't want to seem like a keen bean. It's understandable. People are going to say, oh yeah, I got a first and did absolutely nothing. Just don't listen to what other people are saying. Don't take that at face value and say, well, they got a first and this is what they did, this is what I'm going to do. Just play to your own strength. So don't compare yourself, I guess is the first thing. Second thing is to find your study style. So there are a bunch of different study styles, and I learned about them first when I did my degree back home. But basically there are 5 different study styles, and depending on which one you fall into, and you can figure out, I mean, there are tests online you can take to see which study style that works for you best, and then try it out maybe for a formative or something, see if it actually works out, adjust it as you want. But basically, the different study styles are kinesthetic, so those are people who need to be doing something. So you're writing down your notes over and over and over again. So that style works for me. I literally will write down I wrote down the Lisa's problem question, like the way that I would structure it. I think I wrote it about 27 different times, about a stack of papers, and I just wrote it and wrote it and wrote it, and then by the end, I didn't need to look at anything, and I had it written down, and I could write it up in 20 minutes with the cases, with the statute, with everything right there. So that works for me, but that doesn't necessarily work for people. A lot of people like to type. If you type a lot, then writing is just not something that's going to make it stick in your mind. At the same time, I can't listen to anything. I would sit in lectures and just not get anything out of it, because if someone's talking at me, I get absolutely nothing out of it. But some of my friends would listen to those recordings on Ellie over and over and over again, and that's all they did. They would listen to them, like the same lecture, 3 days in a row, doing dishes, eating dinner, doing absolutely everything, nothing but that, and then they would be able to apply what they've learned, not regurgitate it, but apply what they've learned to the question. So that's an auditory style. Visual is when you have to see things. So those are people who would need a PowerPoint and would just need a lot of visual aids. Those are people who might color code everything as well. Obviously, it can be a mix of the different ones, so don't think you're just one style, but you can play to your strengths that way. Then there's the analytic learner. So an analytic learner is someone who will write out kind of stepwise what they need to do. So let's say you're studying contract law, you will write down a list and say, okay, what is freedom of contract? What is offer? What is acceptance? And you will do it kind of like a checklist, step by step, however it works. Maybe through typing, maybe through writing, but you need that step and you can't miss a step. Those are analytic studiers. And then global is someone who will flip between thing to thing. So they will look very disorganized because they'll be reading land law one second and be like, oh my god, wait, no, contract law, and then go around different things. Again, they just try to tie in everything they know with one underlying principle. That's a little harder to do in law than it is to do in other disciplines, but you just kind of play around and see what works for you. And that's the best way you can go about it. Doing all your formatives, using your formatives as an excuse to kind of mess up, to see how well you know. So I would say, I know it sucks, but I think you get, if I'm not wrong, CNA on Thursday, like for the first years, and they have to give it back next Thursday. Oh, Friday to Friday? They will be Friday to Thursday. I know it's reading week, and I know it's been a long time coming, and obviously you want to go home, or you kind of want to relax, and that's fine, but I would say give it your all, because if you put in all your effort, and let's say you get a 58, then you know, okay, this is what I need to improve on. If you half-ass something, and you get a 58, then you don't really know how you could have improved. You can sit there and, kind of chuckle and be like, oh, well, if I tried harder, I totally would have gotten like a decent 2-1, but you don't know that, and use the formatives as an opportunity to see where you need to improve. What is it, your analysis? Is it just not understanding the question? Where is it that you need to improve? And I would say do every single formative that is given to you, because it will all help. All of them will help you. Same with all of the, I don't even know what they're called anymore. Is it workshop, seminar, syndicate? All of them.
We have all of them.
Everything. Just do all of those as well. I know it's a lot of work. I do know it is a lot of work, and especially for 4 classes where you continuously feel like you're doing the same thing, and I think, are they doing the same kind of material like for 3-week chunks pretty much? Like you're so you're reinforcing that material, and I know it feels really boring and repetitive, and you think, oh, well, I did it for whichever one, the syndicate, I don't really know which one it is, but syndicate or workshop, which one?
Well, we have lectures followed by syndicate workshops, followed by seminars.
A seminar, the 2 that come together?
Yeah.
And then okay. So you would have done it for your syndicate, you don't think you need to do it for your seminar, just go over it, because the worst thing is you'll actually know it for the end of the year. That's not really that bad, just going over it. Like, if you're missing out on a night out, it's really not. In April, you're going to thank yourself for not having gone out on that night out. You're not going to regret that night, I guarantee it. You will have so many nights to go out on, you may as well just do it. It's probably only going to take you like 2 hours, 3 hours max. Study during the day, study whatever works for you, but like don't not do your work just so you can go out or anything else. However, another thing to keep in mind is make sure you're not just studying. So you've got those people who kind of like hunker down and sit in the law library, and that's all they do. And they will brag and they'll be like, I haven't showered in 3 days, I haven't eaten, I haven't slept, I deliver everything. Yeah, don't be that person, because that's not going to help you. You need to sleep, you need to eat, you need to do other things. Even when you feel like I can't do anything, I have this essay due and I don't know what to do, dissertation time for 3rd years who are doing a dissertation, that last month is absolutely brutal. I felt like I could do nothing but dissertation, and if I was doing anything else, I must be wasting my time. That's not it. You're not going to be efficient if you're just sitting there for 3 days on end, not doing anything else. Take a break, as hard as that sounds, and as cliche as it sounds, but go do something else. Go, you don't like running, just go for a walk, go to the gym, watch something on Netflix, hang out with friends, just do anything else. Make sure that you keep yourself somewhat entertained, and make sure that you have things to do. So one thing that I know works for me is I have to be stupidly busy at all times. So last year was pretty much the best example of it, because I was doing my last year of the grad LLB, so it counted for 2/3 of my grade. I was on BLS exec, I was on CLS exec, I sat on the SSLC, academic misconduct, officer. I was applying to master's and PhD programs. I was on the golf team. I did a lot of different things all at once, and that made sure that I never had any moment that I had that was spare was just kind of in relaxation, because I had to organize my time efficiently. So if you can handle it, doing something else is a really great way to kind of keep you focused, make sure your time is filled enough, because otherwise if you have a lot of time, if you just kind of sit there and you're like, well, I've got all weekend to do my web reading, you're really never going to get around to it, because you're like, I could just hang out, I could just do this. And this is personally, I feel that the busier I am, the more productive I am, the better my grades have been. And I think it works out well, because you have to manage your time efficiently. So I guess realistically, don't compare yourself to other people. Find out your study skill. Try out your different study techniques doing the formatives. Keep yourself busy, and make sure that you've got a life, that you're sleeping, that you're eating, that you're doing whatever it is to stay sane. That's all I can give you. I don't know how useful that is, because I'm sure you guys have heard all of that before, but it's there. And also go to your personal tutors, academic tutors, the law school, if you are having any issues, any questions, or how to study, or how to do anything. They're the most supportive staff I have ever seen. You can walk into anyone's office pretty much, ask them a question. If they can't help you, they will tell you who to go to. If you don't feel bold enough to just wander into anyone's office and be like, hey, Richard, how do I do this? Then just send them an email. Honestly, they're there for you, and I know it sounds cliche, but again, they want the best for you. They want you to do well. It's not great when everyone's like scraping a 2-2 for anyone, lecturers and students. Does anyone have any questions, anything? I feel like I've just been talking at everyone. Perfect. Well, I guess I'll give it to the way more experienced and way better advice giver, Richard Boyer, then.
And especially the point about you reflecting upon your learning practice, so that you engage in that critical self-reflection, whether it's note taking, whether it's your preparation for seminars, and you're continually reflecting on whether what you're doing is effective. If it's not effective, change. And you can speak to your academic tutor to start planning for that change. I'm going to talk about how to read cases, what we're getting from cases. I'm going to talk about how to take notes, and how to manage time effectively. So some considerable overlap with data. And I think they'll complement one another, so it's not against Zena. So I agree with everything that she said. I suppose reading cases, not many of us do it for fun. I enjoy them, but I might be in a minority. So if we're going to read a case, we probably need to get what we need from it and move on quickly. So I want to think about why it is we engage with case law, and what it is we're getting from it, and how we might get that from case law. So kind of in kind of classic introduction to how to read cases, we need to identify the material facts of the case, the decision, and the reasoning for the decision. And if you're interested in what judges actually said, which I think is important, if you can begin to discern any obiter statements or any disagreement between different justices, I think that's also really important to capture. So that's the kind of standard advice, but I want to talk about how we can move on from that. So what I'm about to talk about now is in addition to that. We have to do that, but what can we do that's in addition to capturing material facts, decision and ratio? So I want us to think about how we might analyse cases, how we might be able to work out what's going on. Because I think there's an assumption, particularly if you're new to law, that the judges or the courts are some sort of machines. You insert facts and outcome a decision and reasoning. And I think that machine is not, there's not one machine. There's not, and this machine malfunctions. This machine might be an undesirable machine. So this machine, which chucks out decisions and ratio, others are available, other machines are available, other brands are available. So I'm thinking here about the methodology that judges embark upon when they're deciding cases. So there's not one methodology. There are several methodologies. And often one of the ways in which we can undertake analysis of a case is to identify what methodology a judge is using. And in a particularly rich case, you might have different judges using different methodologies. So one of the cases that we look at in year 1 in C&A is Carlisle. So some of you in year 2 and year 3 might remember Carlisle. And for those in the first year, it's coming, so we'll look at it around about just after Christmas, I think. So in Carlisle, which is a case heard in the Supreme Court, what we have is basically 3 different methodologies employed by 3 of the justices. And so we can understand the difference in approach and the different outcomes by understanding how those methodologies differed. So if we look at Lady Hale's speech, Lady Hale, I really enjoy her writing, her speeches, because it's a masterclass in methodology. It's really clear, it's really erudite. It's fantastic to us. So she's talking about proportionality. And so she identifies clearly where the origins of proportionality lie, and she applies them to the facts. It's fantastic. And then at the other end of the scale, we have Lord Sumption and Lord Kerr that are offering radically different methodologies in respect of whether deference should be a relevant consideration to the proportionality question. So for those of you that don't know the case of Carlisle, it's a judicial review case in which a peer, Lord Carlisle, brought an action against the government because the government's decision to exclude Maryam Rajavi, who's an Iranian dissident politician, from the UK, was in breach of his Article 10 right to access information. So freedom of expression includes the right to hear views, and he wanted to invite this Iranian dissident politician to the Houses of Parliament to give a speech to parliamentarians. So his case is unsuccessful. It's unsuccessful for reasons advanced by Sumption and Hale. So when reading this case, you might think that Hale and Sumption are speaking in the same way, using the same machine or methodology, but they're not. So one of the ways in which we can perform analysis is to articulate what the different methodology is that's being employed by Lord Sumption the adoption of deference considerations in analysing the proportionality question. And then when we look at Lord Kerr, who dissents in Carlisle, what he does is he takes an altogether different approach by valuing freedom of speech or freedom of expression differently and letting that valuation guide his methodology. So Carlisle's a really good case for just understanding that different judges might pursue not just different outcomes, but different methodologies. And that's particularly useful in Carlisle because proportionality is such a structured test. So I suspect in contract law, for example, there's lots of structured tests that are to be followed, and I suspect there are similar parallels to be drawn there, where judges are pursuing different methodologies or applying the test differently, or making different value judgments about the different elements of the test. What I've also noticed, particularly in the Supreme Court in recent years, is the extent to which the justices are appealing to empirical evidence to support their judgment. We've seen this in the last few months in a case called Unison. So it's a Crown Law application of Unison and Lord Chancellor, which was handed down in July this year. And what we saw Lord Reid do is take into account empirical evidence about the number of people that were using the employment tribunal. So the decision that was being challenged was a decision to introduce fees to access the employment tribunal. So we're not talking here about kind of legal aid being scrapped. So we're not talking about whether your solicitor or barrister is paid. We're talking about a fee paid to the court to enter the court and for that judge to hear your case. If we're talking about discrimination cases, the starting point is £1,200 just to get into the court. So the legal challenge is to the imposition of fees, and what Lord Reid is concerned with is the impact that this new policy, this fee, has on the number of people using the employment tribunal. This becomes a relevant consideration when he decides that such a fee order was unlawful. He finds his legal principles to support that. So he still proceeds by looking at legal precedent. He looks at one's constitutional right to access courts. So on the face of it, he's proceeding through the methodology of law, acting according to precedent. But we have to, I think, recognise that he's also motivated by what's going on at the employment tribunal. We have to, if we're going to assess substantive access to the courts or to tribunals, we need to recognise that this policy is impacting upon the number of court users, and we can draw inferences from that. So it's really interesting to note the use of empirical evidence in the way that judges reason. We saw this as well with another Supreme Court case a couple of years ago called SG, and this concerned the imposition of a benefits cap. So if you're received of out-of-work benefits, that there would be a cap on the amount of benefits that you can claim. And this was done by government order rather than by primary law, which is why it's subject to judicial review. And in that case, Lady Hale undertook an analysis of who in society this decision affects. And she recognised that the people who would be subject to the benefits cap, the total, the limit by which you can, the maximum amount of benefit that you can claim, is disproportionately women. Why women? It's because it's really affecting single parents. 92% of single parents are women. So she was able to draw upon that empirical evidence to argue that this process, this decision, this cap was discriminatory. So courts are increasingly drawing upon empirical evidence when they're establishing their judicial reasoning, and I think we should recognise that. When you're reading cases, try and understand where the emphasis lies, but also consider what the judges are not talking about. So in the Brexit case, Miller, there's an elephant in the room. Yeah, go on.
Regarding judges relying more on empirical evidence, what's that to do with us? Because we're just trying to find a judgment, aren't we?
Yeah.
Obviously, we should consider that they're using empirical evidence to come to that conclusion, but I mean, what is the relevance of that for us?
Well, I suppose in one sense you are just capturing the decision and its ratio. So what law, what rule of law precedent can you take in this particular case? But in order to provide analysis or evidence of analysis, we want you to evaluate that case. And one of the ways that you can evaluate that case is to try and convey an understanding about the methodology employed by the courts, and to query that methodology, to query whether the courts are equipped to undertake empirical research. Because that's what's driving or informing the decision. In a moment we'll talk about how judgments are political, and I'll explain how they're political in a moment. And if they're using empirical evidence in particular, there's a politics impact inherent in that process and that methodology. So it's really to give you a student about aiding your analysis. So these are ways of evidencing or providing analysis, which is that criteria which is so difficult to attain. So in the Article 50 Supreme Court decision in Miller, the courts did not talk about the prospect of the Article 50 notice to withdraw from the European Union being rescinded. So as a matter of international law, it's well acknowledged that a country, a member state, can embark upon negotiations with a view to leaving a treaty, and if those negotiations don't go according to plan, that they can take back their notice of withdrawal and remain within the European Union. Now perhaps there's a couple of legal reasons why they didn't discuss this. Both parties, both council, decided not to litigate on that particular issue. But surely it's the elephant in the room. And I think Lord Calworth's dissent implicitly recognises that they really should have been talking about that, because what Lord Calworth says in his dissent is that the Article 50 notice starts what is actually a political negotiation, not a legal negotiation. There will be legal consequences, but as we know, Theresa May and David Davis are negotiating currently, and it's rich in politics, not law. It's about negotiating a future relationship with the European Union and negotiating our divorce. So one of the ways in which you can perform analysis in respect of case law is to identify what's missing from the case of what the judges choose not to discuss. I think we should also recognise that the reason that these cases end up at the court is because parties are litigating these issues. But when judges give judgment, they are not just considering parties, they're considering the wider context in which the law operates. So that the judgment is not just facing the parties, but it's also facing the public at large, society, politics, the economy. So judges will bear these things in mind when making their judgment. So one of the ways in which you can perform an analytical trick is to anticipate or explain the effect that a decision will have on that wider context, whether it's society, politics, or the economy. So that you might say that a decision is sound or unsound because of the effect that that decision has on the wider picture. So that's a really I think, accessible and straightforward way, or not easy, but a straightforward way in which you can perform analysis, is if you can articulate the effect of a judgment and say whether that's desirable or not. And that's the effect on the economy, society, or politics. We also need to recognise that there's the broader context in which the court operates. It's also constantly in an existential crisis, because in articulating what the law is, it's reflecting on what its status is as a court, what the judge's role is in the constitution, society, law, the economy. So each judgment also defines a role for the court, whether that's a fact-finding role or a role in determining law, and particularly in subjects like EU law or constitutional law, there's a very thin line between law and politics. So we might often see a political question, like in unison, who pays for the employment tribunal? Should it be the taxpayers or should it be the people that use the court? That's about politics, because it's about who pays for services. If that's turned into a question of law, because it becomes a question about access to substantive justice, and then the courts are encroaching upon the political feeling. And so there's significant disagreement amongst the current justices of the Supreme Court on whether the court should encroach on particularly matters of public expenditure, particularly where decisions have an impact on the public purse. Because the outcome or the effect or impact of unison will be that the taxpayer will pay for employment law litigation in the courts. That's the impact, isn't it? So if the fees are unlawful, who's going to pay for the courts? Who's going to give the tribunal judges wages? It's going to be the taxpayer. So Lord Sumption has been very vocal about how courts should not do this. That these political questions, they may well be rights, they may well become a matter of law, but not for the courts to decide. So Lord Sumption reflects on how Parliament is traditionally the right forum in which political issues can become rights. So in a famous speech that he gave about 5 or 6 years ago called The Limits of the Law, which is freely available on the internet, The Limits of the Law by Lord Sumption, he talks about how in the 1960s and 70s there's a lot of progress, there's a lot of liberalisation of the British state which took place in the 1960s and 70s. For example, decriminalisation of homosexuality. And he says this was done in the public forum in Parliament, and it was Parliament that changed the law and which created rights. That's the correct forum to do it. But the court should not be taking these political questions and couching them in terms of legal language. So let the politicians decide whether homosexuality is lawful or not. This is Lord Sumption, it's not me. And the courts should not interfere with that question, but give effect to the law decided by Parliament. So with these cases, the courts are also engaging in an existential question about their own role in matters which might be public, constitutional, or affect law, society, economy, and so on. I think we should also think about judges deciding a history as well, because particularly in the common law tradition, they're proceeding by precedent. And so the presentation of that historical precedent is an articulation of a legal history. And so they have a great deal of power in deciding the future if they're determining the history. Particularly if we're proceeding, I think in a rather conservative fashion, small c conservative, because the common law is inherently conservative because it proceeds on the basis of precedent, and that any developments in the law are normally incremental, it's normally step-by-step developments in the law. So it's pretty conservative by its nature. The way in which they present that historical precedent is a deciding of history and a setting in motion of future. And it's when you decide history and set in motion a future, or put in place a horizon, that you are deciding politics. So politics is really the art of articulating a history and articulating a goal that you posit into the future, so that the history and future speak to one another and makes that political goal happen. So don't think that even a dry aspect of contract law, don't think it's apolitical. Everything that the courts decide has a political impact because it decides history and it posits the horizon in the future. So I think, think about negligence for those in the second year. I think you're studying it in term 2 this year. It's founded on that famous case by Julian Stevenson, where a Scottish woman found a snail in a ginger beer bottle. It turns out that she's been seeing snails her entire life in a whole range of different objects. She was hallucinating with snails. But the law has latched onto this story, this mythology, and has mythologized it by becoming the basis upon which we establish not just consumer protection, but also the whole law of negligence. So it decides history and sets in motion the future. So really just, if you can articulate the politics that were inherent in that process, and articulate, for example, who wins and who loses as a result of this judgment, that's one of the ways in which you can mount your analysis. So in light of unison, who wins? Court users, people with employment law disputes. Lord Reed is very explicit. Women that will win, pregnant women that will win in the decision in unison, because discrimination cases numerically involve mostly women, including pregnant women. So they're going to win from unison. So one of the ways in which you can perform that analysis is to say that unison is a progressive decision because of the benefits that are conferred upon women litigants, because of the way it deals with the discriminatory effect of employment practices. So try and think about, who wins in unison, who loses, the taxpayer. The taxpayer loses, because now the taxpayer has to pay the employment tribunal, and you might have a view on that expressing. So these are the kind of simple ways in which you can do analysis. So in addition to identifying facts, decision and ratio, that you can start to as well think about the impact that this decision is having on people, who wins, who loses, on the economy, on society, and on politics. Particularly in the public law subjects, how does this decision impact upon the constitutional status of the courts and the other actors like Parliament and the Executive? So that's really, that just a few tips there on how you can undertake analysis in relation to case law. A few things that you might want to look for. Now, taking notes. I see lots of students taking notes from a textbook, and that's fine. I often see students take perhaps 50 pages of a textbook and reduce that to 40 pages of notes. So I would want you to critically reflect, so in the light of what Zayda said, to reflect on the effectiveness of what you're doing. It might be that for some of you, because of the way that you process information, it might be that the act of taking notes is cognitive processing of the information. And that's fine, as long as you recognise that that's what it's for. But I suspect that come the exam, to have a set of notes which is similar in size to a textbook is probably not going to be the most useful set of notes. So try and think about capturing, so if you're making those notes for cognitive processing, or if you're not, also keep a set of notes which are for revision purposes. So the things that you'll want to capture there are your engagements with primary and secondary sources. So in relation to cases, we've just talked about that. So you might have on one side of the card facts, decision, ratio. On the other side of the card, you might have started to articulate your analysis of that case in light of what I've just discussed. So try to articulate who wins, who loses, and the impact of the case on politics, or whether there's anything of note in relation to the methodology employed by the judges, or whether the judges are employing different methodologies, the value of those methodologies, the impact of those methodologies on society, etc. And so you might have that card, and that's ready for revision as well, in relation to each of the cases on the reading list. In relation to journal articles, think about what form of the assessment is going to take. So if it's a restricted note exam, where you can't take in your notes or materials, you'll probably just want to capture a couple of sentences about what someone argued. So the skill there is to read the resource, to take a minimal amount of notes. What are you aiming for? You're aiming for the point that can be uniquely attributed to that author. So whilst you're reading a journal article, I do all the time, I'm learning about the law, because a good author is going to explain what the law is, perhaps taking through a few cases. And I'll benefit from that learning, but what I need to capture by way of notes is the argument or idea that can be uniquely attributed to that author. And there might be a laconic quote worth taking and remembering, but it's probably best to just paraphrase what that author's arguing, so you can explain that. Colin Munro queries the idea of codified and uncodified constitutions is useful because it imparts this idea that uncodified systems have little by way of constitutional writing. And this isn't the case, it's actually the opposite. So you might paraphrase what an author has said and have that written down in your own words, so that in the exam petition you can say, Colin Munro argues. Once you've conveyed that in the exam paper, go back to the analysis that we just discussed in relation to cases. So what's the implications of what that authors are? So what's the implications of politics, society, and so on? What are they saying about the methodology? Do you agree with them? Is what they're saying to be preferred to this other approach, or the approach that the court took? And why is it to be preferred, or why is it not to be preferred? Or what's at stake? So if you're addressing those questions, you're also performing analysis. For those in year 1 and year 2, and less so in year 3, the assessment criteria, you can be performing analysis by just methodically working through different materials, primary and secondary. I think what I would encourage particularly finalists, but also those ambitious students from year 1 and 2 to do, is offer the kind of analysis which I've been discussing in relation to cases, because it will evidence, I suppose, your independent thought on the matter. We see that you're thinking through the issues and the implications of a case or an academic article for law, society, politics, and so forth. So that's one of the ways in which I would encourage you to engage with these materials and kind of put the assessment criteria at the higher end. So analysis is by far the most difficult thing for undergraduate students to achieve, in part because we have so much to cover in law, don't we? There's such a vast amount of knowledge and understanding to be acquired. And you have to convey that knowledge and understanding, but you also have to process that material analytically to evaluate it. What's at stake? What's being valued here? Should something else be valued? What's missing? Who benefits? Who loses out? So addressing those questions will help you perform that analysis. So to repeat what Zaina said, do engage in that critical self-reflection about your note-taking and your learning practices. So if something isn't working for you, change it and talk to your academic tutor about how you might change it or why you're changing it. So sometimes I might be, I started teaching land law 2 years ago, so taught some land law. And last time I studied land law was before the Land Registration Act 2002, so I had a lot to learn. So Section 29, etc. I had to pick that up. So I was spending the summer learning the material, I suppose, like a student would. And I was looking at Dixon, it was Gardner Mackenzie was the other textbook that we used. That if I wasn't getting on with one textbook, I don't know what I should say this, I wouldn't persevere. I'd pick up another textbook and try and understand via some other author the issue, the concept, the doctrine which is being conveyed. So that was about kind of an instant moment of critical self-reflection. Actually, I'm not getting on with this on this particular issue. It was good on the last issue, but not this issue. I'm putting that down because my time is precious. Let's pick up another textbook, Gardner Mackenzie, and see how they explain it, and see if I can make some progress in that way. So be very self-critical and recognise that your time is precious.
I'm really sorry to bother you. When do you guys finish this room, please?
6?
Is it 6?
6:30.
6:30.
6:30, sweet, thank you.
Critical self-reflection. So it can be about your process of note-taking or big questions about how you study. It can also be really specific moments of self-reflection. That resource isn't working for me. Let's find another one. So value your time. Your time is really precious. So I think Zaina was right for you to think about how important it is to also have a kind of balanced life. That you're working, sometimes you're not working. So you need to make sure when you're working that you're being as productive as possible. So constantly reflect on whether what you're doing is working and make decisions. Reflect on those decisions and make new decisions. Talk to your academic tutor about the decisions that you're making and learning. Work hard, but recognise when you're not working and enjoy stuff. Do other things. So make sure that you're managing your time effectively, so devote the right amount of time for each of the activities. So for most of you, you're probably studying 4 subjects. Some final year students might be studying 5 or 6, depending on whether you're taking 15 credit modules. So just recognise that means you're spending a quarter of your time on the subject. If you're spending too much time on one subject, your other subjects will be suffering, and it's not worth it. It's not worth sacrificing the three subjects for the sake of one. So be really strict about the time that you're spending on each subject. If you're working 5 days a week, that's a day and a bit per subject, isn't it? So you could think of it like that, although I know with our timetables and other responsibilities, it doesn't normally pan out so neatly. But think about paying attention to all of your responsibilities equally, where they're equally weighted. If you've got a long reading list and you're just not getting through it, make decisions. So it might be that actually you understand from the lecture what the gist of that topic is about. So do you need to spend so much time reading the textbook? If the textbook and lecture are performing a similar pedagogical act, which is to introduce a student to a topic. So lectures and textbooks are really similar, aren't they? So they introduce students to a topic in a way that's relatively accessible. Sometimes a lecture might talk about contemporary issues, sometimes a textbook might extract different articles or discuss different ideas. The content doesn't map onto one another, but the learning job is very similar. So if you're not getting through a reading list, but you attended the lecture and you think that you have a good working knowledge of that topic, then crack on with the other bits of the reading list in case of the going articles, because that's what's going to be really important for you to prioritise. So make micro decisions about your priorities and micro decisions about that critical self-reflection, as well as the big decisions about whether your style of note-taking is working. I think that's it from me. Thanks very much for listening. Can I take any questions?